This is the Department of Toxic Substances Control Lead Acid Battery Recycling Facility Investigation and Cleanup Program, Berg Metal Site public hearing on the proposed reasonable certainty designation. We're glad that you're all able to attend, and we look forward to all of our time together. But I do want to pause here and let you know that we will be sharing a short presentation and field some questions if you have any clarifying questions about the hearing process before we open the public hearing. And that public hearing will be open after we take a 5-minute break. So if you have a formal comment, please hold on to it until we open the hearing after the break. I want to be sure that I let everybody know that right ahead. That way you can submit your comment properly. Slide 2, please. And again, thank you so much for being here. My name is Jerry Dietrich. I'm a public participation specialist. I am part of DTSC's Office of Environmental Equity, but I do spend most of my time with the Lead Acid Battery Recycling Facility Investigation and Cleanup Program. I know it's quite a mouthful. We call it LABRIC. I'm the PPS for the LABRIC program. For tonight, I'll also be the facilitator for both the public meeting portion of this event and the public hearing later on. Meeting materials are available online at www.dtsc.ca.gov/Berg-meetings. We're posting the link into the chat for you. It's a clickable link so that you don't have to type in the webpage. Slide 3, please. We do have a Spanish audio interpretation available for this event. We ask that everyone select the interpretation icon on your Zoom toolbar and choose a language, either English or Spanish. It is important that you select a language, either one. If you have trouble with your audio or you prefer to dial in, we have a couple of dial-in numbers for you. The English number is 669-900-6833, and the webinar ID is 849-188-67162. The Spanish language number is 877-779-6711. And the participant code is 1847879#. I know the audio isn't always friendly on these Zoom calls, so just in case you need that. We're also going to put that in the chat for you. But I do want to note that the Spanish audio line will not connect to the Zoom meeting, but the interpreters are connected to that line, and they'll be able to ask your question in English if needed. So automated closed captions are also turned on for this meeting. If you prefer not to see them, you can select the CC icon in the toolbar, in the Zoom toolbar, and you can turn them off. You can hide them. These captions are provided for convenience, but they are not considered the official transcript of the meeting. So just so you know. You may have seen that the chat box has been disabled for incoming messages. And we'll be using that chat box to send you information as we move through the presentation. And at the end of the event, we want you to know that we do still want to hear from you. Even if we're not using the chat, you can use the Q&A box to ask a question. And during the Q&A, we'll open it up for clarifying questions. All right, slide 4, please. Again, this event will be in 2 parts. The public meeting, and then later we'll have the public hearing after the break. Both parts are being recorded for future viewing, and we will be making it available online once it's processed. It usually takes like a week or 2. Questions will only be answered during the Q&A part of tonight's event. After the presentations are done, and any of the questions in the Q&A that we get will not be considered formal public comments. During the public hearing part of tonight's event, the public comments will be heard, but no responses will be given. So if you have a clarifying question about the hearing process, we'll take that question during the Q&A, take a break, and when we get back, we'll have the hearing, and then we'll record all the formal public comments for the record then. DTSC will respond to all relevant formal comments submitted during the hearing portion of today's event. And when it finalizes or revises its reasonable certainty designation. Also, it's important to know that DTSC's written response to public comments will be made available for review at 1 virtual and 2 physical information repositories. So we'll cover that more on a later slide about where you can find all that information. Slide 5, please. Tonight's agenda includes a presentation by DTSC staff, well, 2 presentations, followed by a short time for clarifying questions about the hearing process. And then after that, we'll take a short break, and then we'll come back after the break and we'll have our public hearing. During the public hearing portion of the event, again, you will be able to submit comments orally or through the Q&A box. The chat box, as you know, can fill up pretty quick. It gets a little chaotic, so we're just using it to give you information. Any formal comment received in the Q&A box during the public hearing will be considered for the public record, for the hearing record, excuse me. So if you have a question, again, please ask it during the Q&A before we go to break. Slide 6. So a lot of information so far, right? But before we start presentations, I want to make sure to provide you with all the information on how you can contact the LABRIC program staff and how you can view our webpage that has a lot of information about the LABRIC program. We encourage you to visit the webpage to learn more about LABRIC as a program and to contact us with any questions you have about the program, how it was developed, where we are with it now. Our email is labrf@dtsc.ca.gov. And our phone number is 833-752-2742. Our webpage address is www.dtsc.ca.gov/LABRIC-program. You should be seeing all of this appear in the chat for you. But we also have an e-list. We send out program updates, including our annual report to the legislature and site-specific things like public notices and invites to our events. We encourage you to subscribe to the e-list at www.dtsc.ca.gov/DTSC-E-lists. Again, super long. We're going to put that in the chat for you. Once you get to that e-list page, you're going to scroll down. They're all listed alphabetically. You're going to look for the LABRIC one and then click subscribe. For media questions, please contact Elizabeth Leslie Gassaway. She's from our Office of Communications here at DTSC. Her email is elizabeth.leslie-gassaway@dtsc.ca.gov. Her email is on the slides. The slides are available on the webpage, and we're also putting it in the chat for you. Slide 7, please. Here at DTSC, our commitment and our pledge is aligned with our organizational mission, which is to protect California's people, communities, and environment from toxic substances, to enhance economic vitality by restoring contaminated land, and to compel manufacturers to make safer consumer products. Slide 8, please. At this time, I'd like to introduce our presenters and invite them to turn their video on. We'll begin with DTSC's LABRIC Program Supervisor, Igo Shu. He comes from our Sacramento Regional Office. He'll be providing us with an overview of the LABRIC program. This part of the presentation is short, but it does contain a lot of information. Our second presenter is Peter McNichol, the Berg Metals Site Project Manager. He's also from our Sacramento Regional Office. He will present the Berg Metals site background, a history of the site, the fund eligibility, and the status of the investigation, including the proposed reasonable certainty designation. So I just want to pause here also and let you know that a lot of public meetings or hearings that you attend for DTSC start when there's already a cleanup process, right? A cleanup plan. The LABRIC program begins public noticing during investigation phase. So a lot of our presentation is going to be about this phase. This is the place where Berg is, and I'm going to hand it over to Igo Shu, our LABRIC program supervisor, to give you more detail about that process. Igo. You have to unmute Michael, please.
Thank you, Jerry. Next slide, please. Good evening. Thank you for attending this meeting, hearing event this evening. I would like to start my presentation by describing the lead acid battery recycling facility investigation and cleanup or LABRIC program process. The LABRIC program process begins with identifying potential lead acid battery recycling facilities. We search various databases or information sources using certain search criteria, such as secondary smelter, lead smelting, and battery recycling. Once a potential lead acid battery recycling facility is identified, it undergoes a screening process. During the screening process, DTSC scientists and/or engineers will review available evidence to determine eligibility for investigation and site evaluation using the Lead Acid Battery Cleanup Fund. We refer to it as the fund for short. The fund is financed by fees placed on the manufacturers and purchasers of lead acid batteries. If the site is eligible for fund use, it will be prioritized for investigation or site evaluation. In this case, Berg Metals was the first site found eligible for use of the fund monies for investigation and site evaluation. Next slide, please. Once the investigation, the site evaluation is complete, DTSC will review the investigation results to determine whether the contamination is reasonably certain to have resulted from the lead acid battery recycling operation. If the answer is yes, the site is eligible for use of monies from the fund for cleanup or other response actions. If the answer is no, and there is existing contamination on the site, DTSC will refer the site to other appropriate agency or program for their oversight. Next slide, please. Now, I'm going to go further describe the lab program site process, including background information on DTSC's LABRIC program and the California legislation, which authorized and directed the creation of the program. The LABRIC program was created by DTSC to implement the Lead Acid Battery Recycling Act of 2016, which we will call the Act from now on. The Act provides the legal framework for our mission to identify, investigate, and clean up any area in California that was contaminated by the operation of lead acid battery recyclers. This legislation calls for fees of $2 imposed on purchasers and manufacturers of lead acid batteries for each battery sold at retail. These fees are placed into the Lead Acid Battery Cleanup Fund, or the fund for short. It should be noted that the largest number of these batteries are automobile batteries. The LABRIC program is authorized to use monies from the fund to perform a limited number of specific activities. These activities involve two major components. The first component is the investigation or evaluation of areas in California reasonably suspected to have been contaminated by the operation of a lead acid battery recycling facility. The second component is the cleanup of areas that have been determined with reasonable certainty to have been contaminated by the operation of a lead acid battery recycling facility. DTSC may seek cost recovery from potentially responsible parties for the monies DTSC spends for investigation and cleanup of sites eligible for use of the fund. In order for an area to meet the requirements for using monies from the fund for investigation or site evaluation, two primary threshold questions must first be evaluated. The first question is the facility a lead-acid battery recycling facility within the definition provided in the Act? The second question is there an area of the state that is reasonably suspected to have been contaminated by the operation of that facility? If these thresholds are met, DTSC can use monies from the fund for an investigation and site evaluation of the area. Following the investigation or evaluation on an area to meet the requirements for using monies from the fund for cleanup, DTSC must make a designation that a site has been determined with reasonable certainty to have been contaminated by releases from the operation of a lead-acid battery recycling facility. Reasonable certainty shall be established based on all reasonably available information, including information provided by the public, to conclude that the contamination in a specific area was from the lead-acid battery recycling facility. This meeting or hearing is a part of the designation process for the Berg Metals site. And this brings us to the main purpose of this meeting hearing event. We are going to explain why Berg Metals are chosen for screening, why it has been investigated, and why it is being proposed for designation. Now, I'm going to hand it over to Peter McNichol, Senior Hazardous Substance Engineer and the Project Manager for the Berg Metals site. Peter?
Thank you, Igo. Thank you for your time and participation in tonight's hearing concerning the Berg Metals proposed reasonable certainty designation. As Igo stated, I'm the project manager for the Berg Metals site. A little background on me. I've been in the LABRIC program for about 1 year, but I've been with DTSC for over 22 years, managing and overseeing numerous cleanup projects. I've directed cleanup work at several US EPA and state Superfund sites, including state orphan sites. Most recently, I was DTSC's lead remediation project manager for a multi-million-dollar contract to clean up the town of Greenville, devastated by the Dixie Fire in 2021. Tonight, I would like to talk to you about a number of matters related to the investigation and designation process for the Berg Metals site. I will be discussing the site history and background, the eligibility process for accessing monies from the fund, investigation and site evaluation, soil sampling results, the Berg Metals proposed reasonable certainty designation, and the proposed Berg Metals reasonable certainty designation area, also known as the RCD area. Next slide, please. I'm sorry, you're on the right side. I went ahead of me here. So the site was developed for commercial industrial use sometime prior to 1906. The Berg Metals Corporation operated a secondary lead smelter at the site between 1937 and 1958 for the smelting of lead materials, including lead-acid batteries to make harder antimonial lead. Records indicate that lead-acid battery recycling operations at the site ceased in about 1958 when the business dissolved. Next slide, please. Based on the evidence summarized in the site screening report, the LABRIC program concluded that the site is a lead-acid battery recycling facility and that the LABRIC program reasonably suspected that an area of the state was contaminated by facility operations. This allowed the LABRIC program to utilize monies from the fund to investigate and evaluate the area. On January 13th of 2021, the LABRIC program initiated the Berg Metals investigation and site evaluation. In June of 2021, the LABRIC program and its contractor finalized investigation work plans for the soil sampling on the site and in parkways located in public right-of-ways for the area within 1 mile of the site. During the 2021 and 2022 calendar years, the contractor collected soil samples both on and off-site as part of the investigation and site evaluation. In June of 2023, the Berg Metals lead acid battery recycling investigation facility and parkways reports were finalized. The facility report contains on-site soil sampling information, and the parkways report contains off-site soil sampling information collected in public parkways within 1 mile of the site. Next slide, please. Soil sampling conducted in 1990, 2009, and 2014 showed elevated levels of lead exceeding DTSC residential soil screening levels of 80 milligrams per kilogram remaining in site soils. DTSC recorded a land use covenant in 2018 that restricts the use of land to prevent exposure to the high levels of lead remaining in site soils. Currently, the site is covered with large warehouse storage structures and pavement. Next slide, please. As shown earlier, the LABRIC program has broken down the eligibility process for accessing lead acid battery cleanup funds into 4 steps. Upon concluding that it reasonably suspected that the Berg Metals site was a lead acid battery recycling facility and that an area of the state was reasonably suspected to have been contaminated by the operations of Berg Metals, the LABRIC program determined that the area at and around the Berg Metals site was eligible for use of monies from the fund for investigation and site evaluation. This is represented by the second step shown in the slide. On January 13th of 2021, the LABRIC program provided public notice of the initiation of investigation and site evaluation of the area at and around the Berg Metals site, including parkways located in public right-of-ways. Other than the site, DTSC did not collect soil samples from locations other than in the public parkways. Next slide, please. Under the Lead Acid Battery Recycling Act of 2016, DTSC has provided the public with notice and an opportunity to comment on its proposed designation of the area at and around the Berg Metals site, the RCD area, as having been determined with reasonable certainty to have been contaminated by releases from the operation of the Berg Metals facility. The proposed reasonable certainty designation is an important step in the LABRIC program process. If, following the end of the comment period, DTSC finalizes its designation, DTSC may access money from the fund to address contamination from releases from the Berg Metals site. Next slide, please. The soil sampling results from the investigation are summarized in the Berg Metals facility and parkways reports. Those results showed that lead concentrations exceeding the residential soil screening level of 80 milligrams per kilogram are present on the site and in surrounding shallow soils and public parkways within the proposed Berg Metals reasonable certainty designation area. It is important to understand that other than on the site, DTSC only collected soil samples from public parkways. The RCD area is discussed in more detail in a subsequent slide. Sampling results indicate that further investigation within the proposed Berg Metals RCD area is necessary to determine impacts to private individual properties as well as other properties, and to determine whether remediation at any of the properties is appropriate. If the LABRIC program finalizes its designation, further sampling will be needed on private and other properties within the currently proposed RCD area. Next slide, please. This map shows the proposed Berg Metals RCD area within the dotted line. The center of the site is located where the X is shown in the center. The proposed RCD area is bounded by Compton Avenue to the west, East 21st Street to the north, runs through East 22nd and East 27th Street, connecting to Ross Street, then heading south to East 37th Street, and bound to the south by East 41st Street. The RCD area includes homes, businesses, parks, schools, and some industrial buildings. Next slide, please. The LABRIC program determined that the Berg Metals operations impacted the Berg Metals RCD area using 5 lines of evidence as presented in the Berg Metals RCD memo. The 5 lines of evidence are as follows. Number 1, historical operations as a secondary lead smelter, which are known to emit fugitive lead emissions. Number 2, comparison of the distribution of lead concentration contours to the Winrose diagrams for the study area. 3, spatial trends for lead concentrations in soil radial distances away from the site. 4, comparison of metal ratios correlating off-site metal ratios with on-site metal ratios. And 5, elevated lead concentrations and the distribution in soil match the fugitive lead emissions release mechanisms and the transport mechanism for a single point secondary lead smelter source. I'll be handing the presentation over to Jerry now. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Peter. It's certainly a lot of information, and I know that everyone's probably asking, well, where can we get all this information, right? So we'll go ahead and go to slide 22. This is where everyone can go and view the public documents that Peter referenced in his presentation. You can visit any of our 3 information repositories, and they're also linked on our Berg Metals webpage. The DTSC Berg Metals webpage includes links to an interactive map, meeting information such as tonight's hearing, and other resources. The webpage is www.dtsc.ca.gov/Berg-Metals. So that's the homepage. And there's also links on there for how to join our e-list, and also, oh, I did say the interactive map, which is pretty cool to use. You should check it out. The 3 information repositories include the EnviroStore database. The DTSC EnviroStore database is located at www.envirostore.dtsc.ca.gov. You can search by entering LABRIC/Berg Metals, but we're also going to put the direct link in the chat for you. The DTSC Cyprus Regional Office also has 2 binders full of all this public information for you. You can call Miss Julie Chandler for an appointment at 714-484-5337. We also have those same information binders at the Vernon Public Library. You don't need a library card to go and view the public documents, but we do recommend that you call and talk to the library staff to find out when they're open. The number is 323-234-9106. If the information in these repositories is revised, we will be sending out an e-blast, so we want to make sure that you all subscribe to our e-list. And that we also recommend that you periodically check the repository, both the web page, the EnviroStore database, and if you want to, the in-person ones. Slide 23. Okay, so we are at the Q&A portion of our event. I'm going to go ahead and ask our panel to go ahead and turn their videos on. Our Q&A panel for this evening includes representatives from DTSC's Site Mitigation and Restoration Program, also called SMRP, or Cleanup Program. The LABRIC program is a cleanup program within SMRP. Igo Shu and Peter McNichol, who you've met during the presentations, are here. And they're joined now by Steve Becker, Branch Chief, and Mehdi Betahar, Assistant Deputy Director. We'll take clarifying questions for 10 minutes before we break and then come back to open the public hearing where formal comments will be captured for the hearing record. If you have a formal comment only, we ask that you hold your comment until after we come back from the break. Next slide, please. This slide provides an overview of how you can ask a clarifying question about the hearing process. Again, if you want to provide a formal comment, please hold it until after the break. You can use the Zoom audio by using the raise hand feature at the bottom of your screen. When it's your turn, we'll go ahead and invite you to unmute your audio. For anyone calling in on the English language number, press *9 to raise your hand. And when it's your turn, we'll call out the last three digits of your phone number. If you're participating on the Spanish only audio, the interpreter will ask your question for you in English. If you prefer to have your question read by me, you can type it into the Q&A at it's in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. Okay. So I do want to remind everyone that the reports and all of the information that Peter went over during his presentation, as well as all of the background information for the LABRIC program, are available on the web pages that we shared in the chat. All the links are available on the slides. But I do see a hand up, so I'll go ahead and ask Duncan McKee. Go ahead and ask open your audio and go ahead and ask your question.
Sure, thank you.
Sure.
I'm wondering if still operating lead or hazardous waste disposal / lead acid battery recycling facilities such as Quemeco are eligible for this program in light of the fact that the contamination in the community surrounding that facility has been documented for many years by DTSC and EPA and other scientists.
That's a good question. I'd like to invite Mr. Igo Shu to provide an answer.
Okay, let me try to answer that question. Currently, the only active secondary smelter is the Quemeco facility, and as I mentioned in my presentation, so we have a couple of criteria to check. If the answer is yes, or for example, if they qualify the definition as a secondary smelter and or lead acid battery recycler, so then is eligible for use the fund for our investigation. And after that, and if we determine and make a reasonable certainty designation, if the contamination is caused by the facility and it qualifies for the designation area, it qualifies for further investigation and for cleanup actions. But I did mention that in my presentation is a DTSC potentially going to seek potentially responsible parties for the recover the funds DTSC spend from the lead acid battery cleanup fund. So that's basically the process. Did I answer your question?
Thank you so much, Igo. That's really good information. We do have about 10 minutes to ask any clarifying questions. about the hearing process. If you have questions, go ahead and raise your hand. I do see some questions in the Q&A. I will say that a lot of the questions are very detailed, and I would recommend that you go to the webpage, for our Berg Meadows webpage, review the reports. There's lots of information there. I'll go ahead and read one of the questions from Marvin Spencer. His question says, is it DTSC's position that Berg improperly managed lead caused the elevated levels of area contamination? If so, was there any historical data of violations at the Berg facility? So really good questions. These are all really good questions, but a lot of the data that you're looking for is in the reports. You can go to the EnviroStore repository. You can look at the reports there. If you have any questions, you can email us. We only have about 10 minutes for clarifying questions right now. If you have questions about this process, about the hearing process, about submitting your public formal comment to this hearing, please go ahead and raise your hand. I see your hand raised, Ms. Dora Lenasaki. Thank you so much for joining. I did get your email. Thank you so much. Go ahead and unmute your microphone and ask your question, please.
Okay, first I want to say thank you for providing this forum where we can ask these questions. I feel that I haven't completely captured all of the information that has been disseminated by DTSC. I have spent a lot of time on the website looking at the different forms that have been posted on the site. So the question that I'm going to ask is because this is information that I was looking for and I couldn't find it on the website. And so what I wanted to ask, let me, I have it written here. So DTSC has sent community letters, has provided some garden and lawn safety, and has provided environmental health hazard assessments and lead in your health flyers, which I did not receive any of those flyers. Okay. But besides those materials that DTSC claims that has sent to the community, were there any other materials that were provided to the school community within and along the boundaries of the designated area, emphasizing the direct correlation between the current designated investigation site and their current continued lead exposure?
These questions are very familiar. I know that these questions you asked me in your email. I totally appreciate the fact that you may have not gotten that you haven't gotten your packet of information, but we did send out the packet to the mile radius around the site, including all of the schools within that mile radius. And all of the questions that you asked, if you want them to be considered as your formal public comment, you can send us an email to the LABRIC email box. Otherwise, we will get back to you with answers as we can. Your email came a little late in the day today, and I know that we talked about it a little bit, that it's kind of late today. But yeah, we did provide information, and if you didn't get your packet, I apologize. I can resend it to you, but I can also send you an email with all of those attachments. So thank you so much for your question. We've got a few minutes left. I want to go ahead and ask, let's see, Ms. Williams, if you can go ahead and unmute your microphone and ask your question.
Thanks, Jerry. This is Jay Williams, the Executive Director of California Communities Against Toxics. Mm-hmm. And one of the sentinel problems I noticed with this designation is that it is too small. It doesn't designate the area that's been actually impacted from the lead from the smelter. And so I'm wondering why.
Well, again, I really want to save this space for people that have questions about the process. The question you're asking is super detailed, and a lot of that, all of that information is available in the RCD memo. It's available directly on the Berg Metals meetings page. There's a drop-down list right under the event invite that has direct links to the documents, so you didn't have to go to EnviroStore and dig them out. I wanted to be sure it was readily available for you. The RCD memo is there, but on the main page, on the main Berg Metals page, there is an EnviroStore link where you can do the deep dive into the actual reports from the facility sampling, the reports from the parkway sampling. All that information is there. But I want to encourage all of you that if you still have questions, to please submit them as part of your public record comment during the hearing portion. So after we take a break, we'll come back and all of those comments will be considered as part of the RCD process. Thank you. I'm going to look into the Q&A box does, still have a lot of questions. They're super detailed, but I just want to make sure people understand the hearing process. Our hearing process is to take public comment today so that we can consider it when we're doing the designation. So the proposed designation memo is on the webpage. The site facility sampling information, the parkway sampling information is on EnviroStore. Please go take a look at it. You can email me if you have a hard time finding the direct links, and I'll send them to you. But at this time, I want to go ahead and break. We're going to take a 5-minute break. I'm going to go ahead and turn my microphone off, and I'll ask our presenters to also turn off their video and microphone, and we'll come back in 5 minutes. Thank you. So we are back from break now. I'll ask that we go to the next slide, please. For our question answers who put questions in the Q&A, those questions are really excellent for us to capture during the formal public comment portion of our meeting that's going to happen very soon here. So I do want to ask that you go ahead and ask your question during the formal comment portion that's going to begin shortly. We are waiting for the interpreter, so please give us a couple of minutes. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to ask a member of my team to please give me a hand raise when the interpreter is on, please. We want to make sure that all the information is captured in both languages. Okay, we're ready to go. Thank you so much. Okay, so currently we are on slide 26 for those of us following on the phone. Welcome back. We'll now move forward with the public hearing section of tonight's event. As a reminder, again, and for those of you that are just now joining, the hearing is being recorded to capture formal public comments for the hearing record. Right now, I'm going to ask Peter McNichol, who will serve as our hearing officer, to formally open the hearing now. You're muted, Peter.
Got it. Hello again. My name is Peter McNichol. I am the DTSC project manager for the Berg Metal site, and I'm serving as the hearing officer for this public hearing. The time is now 6:21, and the public hearing is officially open for public comments. This hearing is held to provide the public with an opportunity to submit formal public comments on the proposed reasonable certainty designation for the Berg Metal site. I'm going to turn it over to Jerry to facilitate receiving comments on the proposed reasonable certainty designation for the Berg Metal site.
Thanks, Peter. Appreciate you as always. So we're now in the public hearing part of our event. All comments submitted prior to the time marked by the hearing officer will not be considered formal public comments for the hearing record. If you wish to submit public comment during the event, you can raise your hand and say it orally, or you can type it into the Q&A box. Remember that comments may also be submitted via email to us at labrf@dtsc.ca.gov or mailed to me at 8800 Cal Center Drive, Sacramento, California, 95826. A reminder again that all public comments must be submitted or postmarked by 11:59 p.m. tonight, December 19th, 2023. Slide 28, please. So in the same way that we took questions in the Q&A, we will take formal comments. A reminder that any comment or questions in the Q&A box submitted prior to the hearing officer officially opening the public hearing will not be considered for the hearing record. You can use the Zoom audio by raising your hand and press *9 on the phone if you called in the English line, or you can, if you called in the Spanish audio line, the interpreter will make your comment for you in English. You can also type in your comments into the Q&A box and it will be recorded as part of the hearing record. If you have any type of file or attachment that you want to submit information about the site, please go ahead and send us an email because it won't fit in the Q&A. Okay. Thank you, Marvin. I got your response. I do appreciate all of everyone's questions. I just want to make sure that they're all captured appropriately. Thank you, Marvin. Okay. So, okay, Jane, please go ahead and unmute yourself and please say your formal comment for the record.
Good evening. This is Jane Williams. I'm the Executive Director of California Communities Against Toxics. And I'm the author of the LABRIC program. And I am very confused. I do not understand why we are doing this designation like this, because the information in the record clearly shows that the zone of impact from the Berg smelter is much greater than the area that you are proposing to designate. And what that means is that all of the properties that are outside the zone that you're trying to designate will not be eligible for any LABRIC money. And those areas are highly unlikely to ever be cleaned. And this whole process of designation was put in the second LABRIC bill for a very specific reason, and that was to make sure that properties that had been impacted from former lead acid battery manufacturing facilities or from smelters were eligible to receive funding from the LABRIC program. And the way in which the agency is proposing to do this designation specifically avoids that, therefore depriving properties that should be eligible for funding not to be eligible for funding. And we think that this is, I believe this is in direct contravention to the bill that we passed. So thank you very much for the opportunity to comment tonight.
Thank you so much, Jane. I appreciate you. We do see another hand raised. Ms. Dora Lenasaki, go ahead and unmute your audio and state your formal comment for the record.
Okay. I want to ask what factors were used to determine that schools along the boundary lines of the Berg Metals Certainty Designation area should not be included during the present investigation phase and designation phase for which you are seeking funding for during this meeting. And I'd like to know if there is room for adding the surrounding schools along the boundaries of your current proposed certainty designation area as part of the investigation for which DTSC is asking for funding. And lastly, I'd like to add that DTSC is presenting to the public that you want to move onto the designation phase to have access to the funds. But how have you really engaged the community for input regarding the information that has been disseminated in the community? Doesn't DTSC have a fiduciary duty to be transparent with the public?
Thank you, Dora Lena. I do hear your comments very well. I just want to make sure that that's the end of your comment before we move forward.
Yes.
All right, thank you so much. Okay, I see no other hands raised, but I do see comments in the Q&A. Thank you, Connor Moore, for your formal comment. I think we did have Marvin Spencer also asked a really good question or two during the Q&A part. If you could raise your hand and speak them aloud, or go ahead and type them into the Q&A so that we can capture them for the formal record. And since I don't see any hands raised, I'll go ahead and read Mr. Moore's comment. Will areas outside the boundary of the RCD be excluded from any further investigation as part of the Berg LABRIC program? The proposed RCD boundary notably excludes Jefferson High School and the Nava Learning Center on the other side of Compton Avenue. Parkways near other schools were studied as a part of the Parsons investigation. How was the exposure scenario of a school evaluated in relation to the RCD boundary? Thank you, Connor, for your comment. Marvin Spencer asks, what is DTSC's cost assessment based off of early research? We appreciate that question. We will be recording it for the record and for the response to comments. Thank you so much, Marvin. I don't see any other hands raised. Duncan, thank you so much. Please go ahead and unmute your audio and state your formal comment for the record.
So I've been listening, and when I hear Jane Williams, who I know does a lot of good work, speak about DTSC minimizing the impacted area so that to minimize responsibility and minimize funding available. And when I heard the next commenter talk about them eliminating or excluding schools where children are playing in this contamination, it's pretty shocking to me, because all of us that have been working on cases of contamination with DTSC and participating in all the processes have seen an ongoing pattern with DTSC of protecting the big polluters, not taking responsibility for letting them pollute. We've seen the impacts to people being sick in our community from your other factory, your big hazardous waste disposal site here in City of Industry, and that's impacting our community. The way you use the VSP scoring procedure, the legislature is passing this kind of legislation that in theory can be good in DTSC, the way they implement it, and they're failing to take responsibility for them allowing and facilitating these big polluters to basically contaminate us, to make us sick, and they're not doing anything to change that, and it's very disturbing to me. So I think I'll leave it at that, but I mean, it's an ongoing pattern that we're seeing from a whole different angle, and that's the only reason I'm in on this, is to listen. For instance, in this case of Berg metals, you compared relative concentrations of other metals to definitely determine the source of the contamination. You're looking at the distribution of the metals based on the meteorological conditions and things of that nature. And in the case of Quemeco in our community, you refuse to do that. And it's really disturbing how you're protecting these big polluters. You ought to be ashamed of yourselves. And I'm hoping that somebody with some power can come up and actually put you guys in check and make you do what you claim you're doing. And that's, you're not protecting our public health and safety. You're protecting the big polluters who are making a bundle of money on the backs of the poor people that are being contaminated. And that's it. That's all I got to say about that. I hope you make it part of the formal public record, because it's very disturbing.
Yeah, sure.
Absolutely. It will be recorded as part of the formal public hearing record. I want to thank you, Duncan.
Thank you
for your passion and for your effort during this presentation, during this hearing. I'm sorry. Okay. I don't want to stop too soon. I want to go ahead and ask if there's any questions. If there's any comments to be made from the bridge line or on the Spanish side of the audio. Andres, I can see you if you want to nod or shake your head. Yes, no? There is a question. Okay. Oh, there's not a question. Okay. Clarity. Okay. Yeah, so we set aside a whole nother hour for this event. I want to make sure that if anyone else has, any kind of other comment that they want to make known for the record for the LABRIC team. After we close the hearing, I'm going to go over some other information. So I ask that you hang out a little bit after we close the hearing. I want to give it one last shot. Okay, Dora, thank you so much. Please go ahead and unmute your microphone and state your formal comment for the record.
Yes, in light of the information that has been presented to the public by DTSC, I guess my question is, how can the public stop this designation? Because I don't think DTSC is doing a good job. And I don't think they deserve to have these funds.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Again, I want to be sure that that's the end of your comment before I close.
Yes, I would like to receive some information on how we can stop this, unless DTSC commits to doing it right and to engaging the community, because it is not being transparent.
Thank you.
I
so
have
much.
completed my comment.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. I do believe that's it. I'm going to ask one more time if we have any questions on the Spanish language audio at all. I'm seeing none. I'm going to go ahead and ask Peter to go ahead and come back on and close the hearing.
Okay. Since there are no further comments, I'm going to conclude tonight's hearing. The time is 6:34 and the public hearing is now closed. Thank you all for your participation tonight.
Thanks, Peter. So we're going to go ahead and move to the next slide and talk a little bit about some next steps. So now that we've concluded the hearing, the hearing portion is over. The next steps in the designation process is for DTSC to consider all of your timely and relevant formal public comments received during the public comment period, including the comments that were made during the hearing portion of tonight's event and comments submitted via email or mailed to us before the deadline. Once DTSC finalizes or revises the proposed designation, a written response to comments will be made available on the LABRIC Berg Metals webpage. It will also be available on the EnviroStore database and in the 2 in-person information repositories we talked about earlier. The library, the Vernon Public Library, and also the DTSC regional office in Cypress, California. We do encourage you to subscribe to the LABRIC program e-list to receive an email when the designation is finalized or revised. We will go ahead and add that link to the chat for you. Again, it's on the webpage and it's on the slides, but we like people to subscribe right away. So we're going to put the link in the chat. Next slide, please. So information repositories, again, are the webpage, the database, the EnviroStore database. We're showing here the address to the Cypress Regional Office and the address to the Vernon Public Library. Information can be viewed at the library, but we encourage you to call. The phone number shown on the slide. I also want to say that the video for the November 30th public information session that we held in Vernon is now available on the webpage for the Berg Metals meetings webpage. I did send out an e-blast to people on the e-list and to all of the residents who sent me their email during the community survey portion of this investigation. So again, I highly encourage people to sign up for the e-list, and then we'll let you know when this video is available and when the response to comments document is available. But that's it for tonight. I want to thank everyone, our presenters, all of our SMRP leadership. I want to thank all of the behind the scenes people that help make this event possible. If you've ever hosted a Zoom meeting, you know it takes a village, absolutely takes a village. And I want to thank everyone again for your patience. LABRIC is a new program. This is the very first one. Berg Metals is the very first site for the LABRIC program. So we appreciate all of your input, all of your feedback. We welcome it. And we look forward to more engagement with you. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good evening.